Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Therapeutic Madness. I am your host, Mindy Vincent. Please welcome my co-host, Justin Areola. Justin, wave from your screen. And today is part 2 of our series on psychedelic sciences. That's what I'm going to call this episode, or these series of episodes, because there's so many pieces to it. So I don't want to just call it psychedelics because there is science behind them. And so therefore, we have our wonderful guest, Demetri, back. Demetri, say hello.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me back. This is an awesome opportunity.
When you guys see me look up, it's because I'm looking at them up above the screen. I just can't help it. I look at people. And Demetri, you should show the screen your hair.
Oh, yeah?
Demetri has some of the greatest hair on earth. Demetri, how long is your fucking hair? Like when you stand up, does it go to your ass?
Yeah, it definitely touches my butt.
Oh my heavens. Thanks for showing us your hair, Demetri. You have wonderful hair.
Sorry it was so creepily demanded.
I'm happy to oblige.
Stand up and show me that hair going down here.
I'm going to guess that Demetri's heard worse, first of all. Second of all, if that's the worst thing if that was like the best thing I'd ever heard out of a man, I would be doing really good in life. So
hey,
I don't feel bad about it at all. Demetri, thanks for growing your hair long enough that we can say something about it and have people take a look at it. Your hair's
That's right. And welcome to the other side of the coin from a sexual harassment standpoint.
Oh,
Can
man.
you believe him, Chris?
Actually,
Justin? Oh, did we just lose him? Did we just lose him? No. Just kidding. We would never want to cut Justin off the show. So anyway, okay, well.
His attorney will be calling later.
Do you know? Justin is feeling froggy today because, as you can see from our screens, we're still in quarantine. And in fact, depending on where you are, quarantine's already been extended, into May, maybe to the end of May, depending on where you are. So I'm just happy to be showered. I am in sweats. If you could see me entirely, you'd see that I'm in sweats, and I don't care.
I've got real pants on. It's a fancy day.
What?
I said, I've got real pants on. It's a fancy day today.
Do you really? Stand up. Let the camera see.
Okay.
He's in his whitey-tighties watch.
Listen to me and my creepy demands. More of my creepy demands. Show yourself, you son of a bitch.
We believe you. We believe you.
Real pants.
I can't wait till we all get to hang out in real life. Gosh, this is so sad to be separated by this weird teledistance.
Well, since it's an episode on psychedelics.
I know, right? So, Justin,
now should be the time to dose.
I'll take us off on a tangent. That's just what I do. So I can't even remember where we were when we left off. Yeah. So Justin, one of you guys, my short-term memory shit, everyone, in case you didn't already know, you'll know by episode 5 at the latest. So where did we leave off?
Really where we left off was basically just a really high-level introduction into some of what the psychedelics are. And when
I feel like it was not a high-level introduction. I feel like it was a really basic introduction, friend, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, high level from a 30,000 foot view is dialed in.
Literally high up in the air. I'm with you.
Yeah, so we didn't really get into the nuts and bolts of anything. But when we last left each other, we had threatened, teased, and promised our viewers, listeners, to get into some of the theories around psychedelics, so the stoned ape theory, talking about some of the indigenous tribes and their relationships with ayahuasca. We really wanted to hear from Demetri on some of his work in South America, and kind of talk about some of that. Maybe the north-south prophecies can be included in some of that, Demetri. And so really, wherever you want to start, wherever you want to go, we're strapped in, buckled in for the ride. So let's go for it.
And what if we started with why people even do psychedelics? Absolutely. Justin, why have you ever done psychedelics? Demetri, why the hell did you start doing psychedelics? And you got crazy with them and took off to Colombia and shit. Those are pipe dreams for people like me.
Yeah, they
were. And I'm happy to share when I started doing psychedelics, So let's talk about that first. Why do people even start doing psychedelics, and why would people do psychedelics? And I'll share about why I started doing psychedelics, but then how is it different? Because for me, it is significantly different now is for why I do psychedelics compared to when I started doing them.
Yeah. They are
So who wants to start?
Well, I mean, like, I think, Justin, if you want to have your own start with the reasons why you do, I think I kind of shared earlier on the last episode as to why I began with them. I'm happy to touch back into it, but Justin,
I know
I'd
you
like
saw The Matrix. I remember that you saw The Matrix, which,
Yeah.
oh my God, you guys, the viewers, we have to tell them this, Demetri. So like literally a few days later, this meme came up right after the episode with Demetri after we filmed it. This meme came up on Facebook that said, The Matrix was a documentary. And I was like, oh my God. So I posted it on Demetri's page on Facebook. I was like, oh my hell. That's the kind of weird shit that happens. The first time I met Demetri, he and I were in Ruth's Diner up Immigration Canyon, which if you haven't been there, you should go. It was on Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, which people who know me know that's my and like, yeah, it's so good. So we went there and we were eating, and I swear, like, well, we talked about Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin, and then Pink Floyd came on, and then Led Zeppelin came on. So like whenever I'm around Demetri, like whatever we're talking about literally manifests into reality. It's craziness. So anyway, he talked about The Matrix last time.
Not the first person that said that, interestingly enough. Like,
Surprise.
I've had some really interesting experiences. Like one of the retreats that I held for a group in California, we were out in Huasna Valley, and I was talking about wanting to find some owl feathers, and because there were owls all around us, like hooting and everything, and during ceremony, and then the next day we kind of went on like a little nature walk and everything, and found a whole wing of an owl, of a gray owl. It was powerful. And
that's so cool.
That same trip, or journey, I found my mountain lion skull. I found a full mountain lion skull intact. So
that's crazy. Did you keep it? What did you do with it?
I kept it.
You kept it?
Yeah. Well, so the jaguar is my totem. So like large cats are my totem, my medicine. So we can get into those kinds of conversations as far as like shamanistically, also as far as why plant medicine and animal medicine combine in such a naturopathic way to kind of guide us as we are learning about ourselves in this life,
Yeah.
When you say totem, can you explain that to our viewers? Because I think animal totems are very powerful in conjunction with this.
Totem just being like a basis for connection, like something that we relate to very strongly in nature, whether they're aspects of like the general behavior of these animals, the methods that they hunt, live, just their general niche. A lot of people find psychological connections and ties into these animal totems, and it's my core understanding is as far as the reasons that these are put in place to assist with the guidance, because as we learn and we grow into nature, it's crucial that we find I guess how to say this, like checks and balances. And these animals will come into our lives as signs or as symbols in very crucial times. Like nature speaks. If you listen, she speaks in soliloquies through the animals and the trees and the insects and everything else that's out there. And so a lot of this is the deeper journey that I've found with psychedelics and what it's led me to, like we mentioned, my journeys into Colombia and down with ayahuasca, down into the Amazon with the shamans down there. But I mean, kind of curious, Justin, why did you start using psychedelics?
Yeah, Justin, why the hell did you start using psychedelics?
First off, I'm surprised that either one of you would just assume that I've done psychedelics.
Look, you know what? This is a program of honesty, and so let's not be coy. We don't have time for games.
So yeah, I think.
Besides, what is that called? Where the law, like the expiration period on the law, what the hell is that called?
Statute of limitations.
The statute of limitations over, Justin.
I don't care about the statute of limitations. It was mostly just a joke. But
I know it was, and that's why I'm talking shit back.
So yeah, I think my first journey into psychedelics was, either probably 16, 17.
Were they recreational, or like what precipitated it?
Yeah, so it was a recreational thing, but I happened to be kind of in it was recreational, but it ended up being very ceremonial. I was out in nature. I was, staying outside for a number of days, and it just happened that we ran into some people that, facilitated access. And that was my first experience, and it was probably top 5, top 10 experiences in my life, the very first time.
Wow.
It was very powerful. It was very therapeutic. It felt very warm and comforting. I didn't have any of the anxiety or the anxiousness around, going on this journey. I just felt very loved and very connected to the earth and to the dirt. I mean, I sat on a rock. I could kind of feel myself vibrating into like the same vibe as the rocks and the ground around me. I was very grounded, very tapped in. And at the time, I didn't realize that that was kind of what was going on. It was just a very powerful experience for me. But quickly after that, I joined, I was already in the military under a delayed entry program. So I was just waiting to turn 18, graduate high school, and leave. So I did those things, left, and then about maybe 4 months before I got out of the military, I reintroduced myself to psychedelics. And some of that was through psilocybin, some of that was also through LSD. And the reason that, we were experimenting with LSD was one of the compounds that the military couldn't test us for, right? Because they're very strict drug policies when you're in the military. So even, if you tested even on the cusp of having any cannabis in your system, that's like discharge, dishonorable, all those things. And so that was kind of my next journey into it. And we had a little phase there when what we're calling short time, where my family was already back here. And I was kind of on that short time. And so we had some experiences there. And since that, I've come to, during study and really getting into those psychedelic phase, I've been through like a divorce, and I had a small period where my ex took my kids out of state, and I had to fight to get them back. And so I was really on this like soul searching journey for about a year. And so there was a lot of work around a lot of these plant medicines, and really finding myself and helping other people kind of come out of their shell and get exposed to that. Right. Yeah. Just doing a lot of work there. And that was really when I kind of went to psychedelic school, right, to college.
Yeah.
And so a lot of exposure there, a lot of witnessing and holding space for other people, which I kind of found is can be challenging for somebody to really let go of their, you have to really trust somebody to totally let go of your concept of reality in front of someone else, right? That's such a big exchange of trust. And so being able to do that for other people was very rewarding to see the before and after, right? And I'm sure that you've witnessed this so many times in your work. It's almost just like opening a door to a whole new world, right? They walk through this door, and when it's all said and done, you can actually see it. You can see it on their faces.
Yeah.
You can see it in their eyes that they've seen something that, you created this spark, or you've helped them see into this room, right?
Yeah.
And so that's been very rewarding. And then taking that to like vets and people that I knew that were, moving away from the military or had dealt with a lot of heavy shit, I found that to be very powerful. And then since then, there's been a lot of work around microdosing and helping people who are maybe a little bit afraid to go on a full journey, but like to walk around the block. And you can see even changes in those guys within a week or two of just following some microdosing. And so You know, I'm a huge believer in the power of psychedelics and the power of plant medicine. I've never seen a compound that is so transformative in such a small amount of time, even just one experience.
Yeah.
And the effects last for such a long time. It's something that, you know, I looked back on for years, you know, from my first time. And I know from, you know, the people that I've talked to and helped and been with, they still talk about some of those experiences. So that's kind
It
of,
can last a long time. I think it's
yeah,
important that we say that it can. It doesn't
right.
like not, and we're not talking about the effects. We're talking about the insights gained.
Yeah.
But like that doesn't mean that it does. Like many people use psychedelics and cannot hold on to the insights, and that's actually one of the dilemmas that I have found. Like even as a therapist, like in psychedelic assisted sort of therapies, like how do you help people hold on to those insights? You know, because so I just wanted to jump in and say that really quick because I want to make sure we
The way
don't ever say things like you know.
I
Well,
think
and when I talk about effect, I'm not necessarily even talking about like the insights that were gained while you're,
Mm-hmm.
you know, having, but like residual thought patterns. So like some of the science and studies show that even with just one dose in treating like a PTSD or some type of high anxiety condition, with just the one therapeutic dose, there's a reduction in symptoms for up to a year.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's what I mean when I talk about effect. It's not even necessarily like all the wisdom that you're shown, but just a residual effect of not feeling so anxious or so stressed out
Yeah,
around
but
the
don't you
condition.
think? But I would say as a
And I don't
therapist,
think
like
it's like
I
that
would
for
say
everybody.
that that comes from some type of insight that people gain, because just dosing in itself actually releases a bunch of serotonin and actually increases anxiety and depression post initial dosing.
I
You
don't
know,
know.
so I mean, so and I'm not saying like I mean, and that's I think that that depends on the person really, but
Yeah, I think you're
I'm
right.
just saying that like I think that as a therapist, I believe that any kind of changes that may come in PTSD symptoms are a result of some type of insight that has been gained through the trip. It wouldn't just I can't imagine that it would just be because somebody took mushrooms. You know what I
Actually,
mean? Like that
so
alone is
there's
not enough. Like you'd have to
no. I
really, you
understand
guys
where
would
you're.
really have to do some work to convince me as a therapist that that's even possible.
Well, let me present this to you. We know that when you have psilocybin compounds active in your brain,
Yeah.
that your brain starts to form new neural connections, right? And there are
Yeah.
other mushrooms who do this. So like lion's mane is another nerve growth facilitator.
I
And
take that from my brain.
so even if there isn't a hallucinogenic effect, the fact that you're creating new neural pathways allows your body to reroute. So like when you have trauma memories that are triggering through those same neural connections, when you start facilitating new neural connections, it allows your brain, whether it's not like everybody is this way and everybody
Yeah.
is not, but it does facilitate new pathways for creative problem solving. And I don't know, Demetri, maybe you can weigh in on this, but
Those are insights.
there is some science to suggest that even if you do not have an insight from a hallucinogenic, like people who
Mm-hmm.
microdose are slowly finding ways to rewire their thought patterns without having any insight, without even having a therapeutic effect. All of a sudden it's just, wow, my creative problem solving has improved.
Has
Or
enhanced.
I'm not stuck in this thought loop that I was before, but they haven't had any hallucinatory experiences. So I don't know, maybe Demetri, maybe you can
Well,
kind of
but
get in
you
the
don't
middle
have
of
to,
this.
but you don't have to have a hallucinatory experience to have insight. Insight in a therapeutic manner, when we're talking about insight, it's just gain knowledge.
Yeah.
Like it,
Yeah.
and it can be little tiny aha moments. It can be great big, like, oh my God, kind of moments. And like I've had both on psychedelics, you know, but just little tiny even nuances where it's like, oh,
I
ah,
think
and
like,
that in itself is an insight, which that changes behavior. And for neural pathways to remain changed from a therapeutic perspective, that behavior pattern has to be repeated. You know what I mean? It can't, like neural pathways don't just up and change one day.
yeah, I mean, and like to weigh in on it, I guess like from what I understand about like like neurogenesis and the process that's there, we're looking at, you know, roughly 27 days that glial cells form after the introduction of something such as dimethyltryptamine or psilocybin. These types of compounds definitely are nerve growth factors and create the what I would say is the endogenous awareness of creation for these pathways that we are choosing.
Yeah.
I think it's important here that we differentiate between the mind and the brain. They're two
Yes. Thank
completely
you.
different things.
Right.
And what you're getting at, I think what you're trying to present here is the recognition of the default mode networks that we operate on as being just basically conscious within our own unique experience. And these networks are completely different for everybody and the way that they've formed them. And a lot of people who go through, say, military training or any kind of rigorous discipline or training, they are structuring their conscious experience through ontological framework of how they experience their own reality. And what I mean by that is like for people who go in the military, you are going through boot camp, you're being indoctrinated from the ground up, you're being broken psychologically.
Yep.
First and foremost, broken psychologically so that they can build you. And that in and of itself is extremely traumatic, because you're being rewired to being given orders, and that's the only thing that they accept. And Godspeed to our armed forces. Conflict is necessary in some instances. However, the indoctrination that happens in those spaces can be very damaging for the soul. And I feel that these medicines, ayahuasca, ibogaine, psilocybin mushrooms, they assist us with the upheaval in the process of recognizing the code, if you will, that's been overwritten upon our own blueprints. Because once we acquiesce enough into our own being, we essentially know who we are, first and foremost, and then we are able to identify exterior influences in a psychological manner and relationship / terrain. And so once we start operating from a extricated perspective, is what I like to call it, we're able to see the way that we are choosing these frameworks, like consciously, especially with the application of microdoses, especially with the application of anchoring experiences, is what I would prefer to call them, in the sense of these larger, heavier doses or heroic doses that people take to go on these larger journeys into their own selves and into their own minds. However, the differences are dynamic and versatile in a sense of being able to apply the consciousness and to apply the momentary reasoning that we experience, I guess, in a format of time,
right,
in a linear fashion, and so it's very important, these plants, these medicines, psychedelic compounds, to give us this insight, to remove ourselves far enough away from ourselves so that we can see ourselves clearly, in a non-attached, observational perspective, like you mentioned before, and being able to create that awareness to direct. And this is what the shamans and the taitas of the Amazon teach with ayahuasca. Many people have heard the term maestro being tossed around in these circles, as far as the facilitators, and the reasons why they have the title maestro and the master, or director, because that word translates differently, is because of the ability to become conscious enough within your own space and to recognize what is happening in the moment, and beginning to direct your energies accordingly, and how that looks for your own experience. And many people, I don't feel, are given the proper initiation into life in this day and age to apprehend themselves. And so they are constantly struggling to get recognition from someone else or society, or to be given direction from something else, following the next Instagram, Facebook, whatever it is, right?
Yep.
And so the medicines, what they do is they initiate us into life,
right.
And it's one of the most beautiful, profound things that I have found in my experience and in my journey with these, because I started working with psychedelics when I was 15, and I'm now 29. And so, and it's been a main focus of mine, because they fascinate me. They interest me, the way that they give me ability to view myself. And, don't get me wrong, I went from the recreational to being, how to say this, careless, to now being very focused and dedicated in the direction of how I apply these medicines. And that's very important.
It is important, but I also want to say, there is nothing wrong with recreational psychedelic use whatsoever, and I love recreational psychedelic use. Psychedelic use does not always have to be all deep. In fact, I have this certain friend who, we go to Denver or Oakland, and we go shroom there. And because it's decriminalized there, so my friend and I go there, and we'll take a trip, and that motherfucker is always trying to go all deep, and I tell him, I'm like, get away from the light, Carol Ann, what the fuck are you doing? Because psychedelics are fun, and I certainly do not want people to take from this episode that it's only medicine, I believe that even in recreational use, the very first time I took a psychedelic, it was LSD, and I was 12 or 13 years old. It was the very first substance I ever took. I used LSD before I even used cannabis. I know, I don't fuck around. The first substance I ever used was crack cocaine, actually. But that's because I had a weird and traumatic life. So anyway, but I used LSD, and I loved it. It was one of the greatest experiences of my entire life. And I remember I was in Salt Lake, in the middle of Salt Lake at the Cottonwood Mall, wandering around with my friend, and there's this road right behind the Cottonwood Mall that's called Memory Lane, and it ends at a cemetery. And I was like, oh my God, let's take a stroll down Memory Lane. And then it all ends at a cemetery, and it's whoa, just those kind of things can trigger the deepest kind of thoughts, and these crazy, I have sat on a swing in an elementary school playground and had some of the most profound insights of my life that have changed my soul, that have changed who I am, that have changed how I love people, that changed how I interact with people, and there was nobody there to guide me through it. And there was no medicinal attachment to it. It was just it started with just having fun with friends, so I think that it's important that although we can use this medicine for very directed kinds of things, we can also use it for fun, and to have these bonding moments with friends around campfires, you know what I mean? And so
just as powerful. I think that what a lot of people fail to realize is that, celebration and mourning are opposite sides of the same coin. Being able to create that connection and that relationship to where you can celebrate and, cry in the same sitting or situation is very important, and recreational substances use in general is very powerful for the exploration of the self, and that's important, because that's where I feel a lot of self-courage is developed in the self, and understanding who we are and how and why, and
learning how to let go. Think of how many people, Demetri, that are wound up tight as fucking corkscrews, right? And when people use psychedelics, Justin, you were talking about that, the people, people's ability to be able to let go and let you see them in a different reality, right? Or let you see them experiencing a different reality. I think that that's such an important piece to all of this.
Yeah, and I agree. I think, it's hard for me to even get into the conversation of what's recreational, what's medicinal, because I think that the majority,
I just call it all responsible use myself.
And I don't know that it's all being used responsibly, but I will say that
that's probably true.
I do feel like there is a significant amount of what us as a society would deem recreational that's actually therapeutic.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And so recreation in itself is therapy, right?
Absolutely.
Yes, it is.
And
learning how to have fun.
Right.
I'll tell you what, there is nothing, anybody I've ever gone on a psychedelic trip with, I have a lifelong bond with those people. It's like going through I hate to make this, reference, but like it's like going through treatment with people. When you go through a treatment with people, you slung snot with them and shared your deepest, darkest things and had these insights and stuff that bond you for life. And that same thing has happened to me in 12 hours on LSD or 6 hours on mushrooms. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
With certain people. But you know what? We actually need to pause. So wait, we're going to pause right there and we're going to come back and we're going to pick up with that idea of like, what is recreational versus what is therapeutic? And we'll delve into that. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Stay mad. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Therapeutic Madness. Today we are talking about, this is part 2 in our series about psychedelic sciences. So we have our wonderful guest, Demetri, here with us. And of course, our distinguished co-host, Justin, who is joining us as well. And we're all on here through Zoom. So welcome to our quarantined life. So when we left off, we were talking about therapeutic use versus recreational use. So let's talk a little bit about that, because I think, Justin, weren't you just saying something about you, or Demetri, one of you guys was saying something about how you feel like all use on some level is therapeutic?
Yeah.
And I also feel the same when it comes to psychedelics. Well, actually, when it comes to any substance, like I believe that all people are using substances either to seek pleasure or avoid pain. Sometimes it's a coping skill for people. It is therapeutic in the way that like substances do give us a very predictable type of release and, kind of an escape from what it is we're trying to go through. And that is what all coping skills do. When people go running and they get that runner's high, I mean, some are just healthier than others, right? So with psychedelics, though, specifically, the reason why I think they are extra therapeutic, even in their recreational uses, is because of the insights that you will inevitably gain. That I have never met somebody who's like really shroomed or used ayahuasca or ibogaine, DMT, something like that, and not had some type of at least semi-profound experience. I have not personally ever met somebody who has not gained an insight from a psychedelic experience. So therefore, I think it's even more therapeutic that I just never could have learned any other way. There's vibrations and energies and things I experience that I could not experience another way that I know of right now. I know people who can meditate to a place where they're like literally with God. I'm not one of those people, so I haven't experienced that. So psychedelics actually have taken me to those places. So what are your guys' thoughts on recreational and therapeutic?
Justin?
Well, so like I was saying before we took our break, I think that recreation in itself, that the very term recreation is therapeutic, and humans have used, humans play, and we see this in the wild. Animals play as well. It's a very
They're so cute when they do.
Yeah, it's a very useful term for learning. Like even you'll see cubs that are playing with each other and kind of wrestling around, but they use that to learn how to like move their bodies and deal with somebody's coming at them. They use those skills later on in life. And I think
people just like to have fun. Human beings are hardwired to seek pleasure and avoid pain.
Right. And humans use play as a like initial social cue, right? You're a child on the playground, you learn how to have a conversation and exchange words and share ideas and join in on certain things. You're playing together, or you have the playground bully, and there's some adversarial things there too. So I just think there's so much that's learned in a playing scenario that I don't think it's fair for somebody to say, hey, a recreational product isn't have medicinal use, right? And so that's kind of what I was talking about there. And I think we all could recreate more.
Yeah, I mean, like look at the etymology of the word, right? Like recreate, recreate, right? Yeah. So I think that learning to have an initial catharsis, I think that therapy in and of itself is a tool. It's a faculty. It's not something that is innately, known within a species. Like it takes study, it takes practice, it takes awareness of patterns and psychology, and so therapeutically, I think it's important to be able to teach people a cathartic release. What that feels like, and most of these substances create that. And in that recreation, people seek pleasure or they avoid pain, and they're able to balance their lives, create equilibrium, to continue on in the mundane aspects of our world, because there are some things that require coping. Nobody knows what the fuck is going on, especially when we get to
especially today.
and like it's one of those things that we're all, like, once you get to a certain point in life, we kind of recognize that everybody's winging it, and doing the best that they can with what they have and what they've studied and what they've practiced, and therapy, recreation, like they're opposite sides of the same coin, I'd say, in that aspect, and recreating that cathartic release is I think what people seek with coping, whether it's cannabis, whether it's heroin, whether it's whatever. Like it's something that's going to completely release them from whatever it is that they're experiencing and give them emotional relief.
Yeah.
And that's something that is powerful, and it is important to be mentioned, because I mean, God, I fucking say it, but some of these harder drugs can be therapeutic.
All substances are therapeutic, like in some level. And I'm going to say that because do you know what? If people were not getting something from it, they wouldn't be fucking doing it. And you know what? Besides that, like even heroin can be used in a productive kind of way, right? But most people who shoot heroin end up not using it in a very productive way. But there's nothing wrong with heroin, cocaine, even methamphetamines, things like that in and of themselves. There's nothing wrong with any substances. How some people use them. And people are seeking something from it, and people also are seeking something from Twinkies and Diet Coke when they're eating those off the fucking chain. It's the same kind of thing when you look at people with diabetes. They're like, oh, you're not supposed to drink any soda. Do you know how many 2 liters of soda I've confiscated from my diabetics in treatment?
Yeah.
Too many to count, sir.
Well,
Too many.
I mean, like the sense of being able to see that, like medically, like Justin, for instance, like, opium, the poppy plant, right? Like, it was used medically to take people out of their body so that they could be worked on, surgically. The use has been perverted. The
opium
by some people
was
by some people, not by all people though.
Was a game changer for humans, right?
Yeah. But what I'm getting at is creating the awareness that these plants have purpose. Everything has a purpose behind it.
Yes.
Right? Even at a microdose level compared to a macrodose level, it is like that they all have purpose, and it's how you utilize them. And this is why consciousness has been such a pervading topic that comes into play with psychedelics, because of how we operate or how we direct or recognize ourselves in the mirror, so to speak. And the differentiation between therapeutic and recreation, I mean, like I said, same coin. You're putting that coin in the same slot, and depending on the use and the person and the individual, they could be for the actual word usage, just perverted in their sense of how they understand the proper use, like of these plants, of these medicines, whatever they are. Everything is medicine, I think, and that's something that's important also, like to recognize that the air that you're breathing is medicine just as much as the antibiotic that you're taking to fight off a fungal infection or bacterial infection, right? And so like there's the awareness of how we are using and directing our consciousness, and that's how like it always comes back into this for me as far as psychedelics is looking at myself in the mirror. Like it's odd because I grew up in a very interesting middle class family. However, around the age of 13 or 14, I started waking up in the mirror. Like I would go to sleep in my bed and I would wake up staring at myself face first in the mirror with my nose almost touching the glass, pupil gazing. And it was something that happened multiple times. And, it's been a recurring lesson for me of just understanding that, you know, we are mirrors for one another, and how we reflect along with the rest of the cosmos and the rest of the, you know, of our waking experience. Everything is always going to be constantly reflecting its relationship to you, and your relationship to it. And so, you know, people who struggle with addiction like heroin or meth, they are constantly seeking that pleasure response, that cathartic release from their pains and their fears and the things that they want to avoid in life. But these things, they wait for us, right? And they never go away until you stand and you face them, and you actually decide to, you know, face your demons. So
I love that, actually. I love
Me
that
too.
you say, you know, these things wait for you, because that's so true. And I want to be just very clear that I am personally not advocating, you know, I think access to certain substances, some people just can't handle their shit, right? And so
Yep.
I don't advocate for all of that. But I do think that all of these plant-based medicines, you know, so like opium and the things that have been derived from that, coca and the things that have been derived from that, all had a purpose and a use.
yeah,
And it was man's perversion that kind of took it in a different direction. But I do want to be clear that I personally am not advocating for people to have, you know, broad range access to every drug compound, because there's just a lot of idiots out there. So
Well, and I don't believe, and I want to clarify too, like we're not ever promoting substance use here. There's plenty of people
Yep.
who cannot use substances.
Yep.
And that, but what we are promoting is like real honest conversations about substances, because there are some people who can never use substances. There are people who use them in a perverted way, but substances in and of themselves are not the problem, you know. So each person needs to decide for themselves, you know, what they should or shouldn't do. Each person has their own experiences and their own relationships with substances, and our goal here is to help you navigate that in a healthy and productive way that is as less harmful as it can as least harmful as it can possibly be, because I'm a harm reductionist. So that is, and actually, in order for people to have safe consumption to happen, it has to be legalized, because things have to be regulated in order to, you know, just like we know the free market doesn't regulate itself, drug distribution and drug growth also doesn't regulate itself. Drug production doesn't regulate itself, you know, as much as people would like to say it does. So actually, if we're being honest, I am an advocate for legalization and regulation, like full legalization and regulation, instead of just decrim. Me and my friend Demetri have a little bit of a different view on that, but that's because I am a harm reductionist, and that's because if we don't know where substances are coming from, we don't know for sure that they're safe. And then that's where damage comes from, and that's where people die, is because of tainted substances often. So anyway, so there's all of our disclaimers. We're never endorsing substance use, and if you use substances, we also don't judge that. I don't, you know, so let's have honest conversations
judging you
about
so
that.
hard, everyone.
Justin is, and you know what? You can send him hate mail. His email is no.
I judge nobody. I was kidding.
It's so funny. But you know, something that you guys, that we were saying a second ago, like I do think that the longer or the more times that people experiment or utilize psychedelics, I think the more that the use turns to from like, yeah, we're going to trip and have this good time, to like, what am I going to get from this? Like it becomes more directed, you know, like even for me, when I indulge in psychedelics now, like during the time that, like when I'm taking, because it's typically mushrooms, psilocybin, that I engage in legal places, right? So I go to Oakland and Denver and stuff and use them there. And then, but when I do, like during the first part of my trip, I'm having a good time and I'm just letting it go wherever it goes, right? But like especially when I start to come down, I know that there's something that I'm supposed to be taking and reflecting from it, you know? So it becomes much more directed, and I ask the universe what does it want to give me? What does it want me to take? You know, what does it want me to have or learn or, you know, grow from? And I think that with the experience of psychedelics, our recreational use does become more therapeutic, just because of the very nature of psychedelics, period. They're very
I agree with that.
eye-opening.
And I think, you know, psilocybin and other like plant-based hallucinogenics have this remarkable way of self-regulation, in that oftentimes if you have a hero's dose, or you've taken too much, a lot of times that's regulatory in itself, where you're like, "Whew, I did a crap ton of work for that. I don't need to do that again for a little while." You know what I mean? It's like
Right.
if you're doing a hardcore heavy dose and you go off into this very heavy journey, like it's not like you're trying to rush right back into that. You're sitting with that for a minute.
Yeah.
Um, and oftentimes you'll see people self-reducing their dosages as they move through it, even in phases.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And let's talk about dosages, because dosages, that's a big thing. Like how it impacts you, what's going to happen, everything like that is very dependent upon dosage. Demetri, tell us a little bit about microdosing versus like heroic dosing, or just like
Sure.
And where do you
regular
like to
dosing.
have people from, like a spirit journey? Where do you like to see them? Like, do you dose by weight, or do you dose just as a general guideline? I'd love to kind of hear some of that from you.
Sure. A lot of it is based upon where they want to go.
Yeah.
Like I've developed allies, like a certain relationship with these plants, to an extent to where being the facilitator and, being able to hold the space for people to be able to go to these places, it's surely dependent upon where they want to go, like however far they want to go. And it just, it's kind of in reference to that. So like a microdose, micro from a James Fadiman perspective, and
Who's James Fadiman?
James Fadiman is the Jim Fadiman. He's a renowned psychologist, and I want to say
Spiritual psychonaut, maybe.
Spiritual psychonaut, just in general.
Yeah.
He's on the board for Scepter, so Parth knows him. But he described a format of being able to create a series of, and like a structure within your week to have a microdose, it's recognizable to be sub-perceptual and perceptual as key terms here, because anything that is like perceptual is not considered a microdose. It is considered like a macrodose technically.
So a microdose of what? Of what kind of, when people are microdosing, what kind of substances are they taking? Are people microdosing on ayahuasca?
People could, but I wouldn't recommend that.
Not, right?
Well,
People don't know, Demetri, help us out.
Sure. It's something I'll again, like in the use, like the reasons as to why you're doing it, and it's taking us somewhere. These plants, they're teachers. They teach us about ourselves, and they teach us about our placement here in society. And so, psilocybin specifically, at a microdose level is typically for the average, adult male and female. I'd say it's somewhere in the 150 to 250 milligrams. So, and in that range, you're gonna experience a nerve growth factor. Paul Stamets recommends that you add other things into that stack for the nerve growth factor and the directed focus work with breath work and those kinds of things. He recommends lion's mane being added into that. Cordyceps.
What's the goal of microdosing?
The goal is directed focus, and being able to grow specific networks of nerves, because there are different networks that we operate on. Like, for instance, when we drive a car, most people go into autopilot and they go from one destination to the other, and then some people don't even remember how they even got from A to B.
That has a name. It's a psychological effect, and I'm trying to think of it, but I'll tell you what that name is. It has a specific name. Go on.
So, these networks that we operate on, they're very subtle. Getting into some different language or lexicon, these would be the universe recognizes frequency. The frequency that we are holding, and the reasons why we are wanting to hold in this frequency is for manifestation of whatever it is that we're trying to create in life, in the direction that we're going in our own journey. But from the scientific aspect, you're looking at the directed, focused intention of being able to say better your meditation game. better your awareness of like just general proprioception of your surroundings, whatever that environment may be.
Right. And I think some of the things that I've heard very commonly, I get asked about microdosing a lot. And I have a lot of, business contacts where, Silicon Valley types, they've really tried to understand, what microdosing is and what it means. And oftentimes the things I hear is improving creative problem solving. Dealing with environmental stress in a non-linear way.
Well, because psilocybin specifically has been found to be effective in treating depression.
Right.
The microdose of it alone should help the depression because it creates more serotonin.
Yeah, and so those are some of the things that I hear from people who are wanting to try microdosing, and competitive edges. Like there are people who are doing things just to have a better, like, improved thought processing, quicker decision-making skills, right? And the ability to assess situations more rapidly and come up with answers to those things that you're dealing with. So those are kind of some of the things that I
microdosing
hear
isn't
driving
magic. Let's be clear, though, because that sounds like magic almost.
That's not magic, though. That's
magic.
Because when you're microdosing, you can't feel it, though. You can't feel it, right? Like you don't have any effects from microdosing, right?
Yeah,
so it's
but
not not. What is that movie where they take the pill and they like know everything?
That's Limitless, and Limitless is based on something that's real. It's called nootropics. Yep. And I do consider
Look at Justin dropping these knowledge bombs.
Yeah, and I do consider psilocybin and other psychedelics to be nootropics in that there's not a toxicity associated with it.
Right.
You're increasing the brain's ability to process information.
There are applications on certain receptors that need to be maintained.
Yes.
Yes. And all I'm just saying is that it's just not it's not like a magic pill. Like people don't microdose and all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, I'm like this magic problem solver and I've got all these creative, you know what I mean?
Listen, you turn into a leprechaun. You turn into a leprechaun and you grant wishes, okay? So
Justin, I will be throat punching you later on.
Let's accept that as scientific fact.
Automaticity, yeah.
I'm with you though, Justin. I totally agree with Justin. And at the same time, people hear that stuff and they're like, oh my God, I could start microdosing and I could have this complete turnaround. And maybe you could, maybe you couldn't, but it isn't that.
So let me touch
microdosing. Would you say that microdosing is something you have to do? So from a therapeutic perspective, the studies I've read and such, it wasn't when you're doing microdosing, it's something that people do regularly. It's not something that people just do once or twice. Like, remember we were talking about when people are macrodosing?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And
right. So can you guys talk about that? Like, how does the microdosing part work? Yes, people don't feel the effects of it, right? Because that's something people are afraid of when they're thinking about utilizing this. And from a therapeutic perspective, it really does treat depression. So it really does help treat anxiety.
Let's take Ibogaine, for instance, okay? From a therapeutic standpoint and a medical standpoint, biopharmacologically, what it does, is it kicks out, opiates out of the receptors and binds. I forget the actual name of the receptor, but it binds it for anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks.
Yeah.
From the initial. It's the dopa-2 receptor.
Yeah. So
Justin always knows this kind of shit. You see, that's why I hang out with him, because he's really smart.
So with the macro dose, I mean, from a therapeutic medical standpoint, somebody who's getting off of heroin or methamphetamines, who's going and seeking out Ibogaine to help them with their addiction, what the macro dose is doing is it's giving them a foundation to operate on and to get to know themselves, what they are like without the drug.
And what is a macro dose? What is the level of a macro dose?
Well, I mean, Ibogaine is very powerful. So very small amounts can take you to a very far place. So do your research, folks. I cannot emphasize that enough. If you decide to seek out an Ibogaine, facilitator or somebody who's gonna, walk you to a clinic, very important, but Ibogaine is, macrodose, I think, is something like 300 milligrams or something like that. I could be off on that. It's been a while since I've looked at ibogaine.
Justin, is this something you know off the top of your head? Because I could see you knowing some shit like this.
Yeah, so I think your macrodosing starts at 250. I think you're right on the dot, actually, Demetri.
Yeah. So I mean, like,
These guys.
like 25 milligrams of ibogaine, like, or like the actual molecule itself that is held there is a powerful substance. And therapeutically, the microdose, how it supports the individual's journey post macrodose, is by assisting them with the lengthier transition. By still giving their receptors the opportunity to not have the withdrawal effect that these opiates or dopamine receptors create when they go cold turkey. And so that's that. I mean, from a therapeutic standpoint, ibogaine, the microdose is for actual health benefits in a sense.
After the macrodose, though, you said.
Yeah.
Where when you're using psilocybin, I know plenty of people who microdose with psilocybin that have never macrodosed with psilocybin. Yeah. So
what I'd say is those people
are about those differences.
Taking a competitive edge with it because they've experienced like the mini wave, that shrooms give you or whatever, and it's kind of like it's kind of a little bit of wind in your sails for the day, a little bit more clear, whatever it is, right? People have their odd reasons, but what I would suggest and say is take the leap. Like Terrence McKenna said, nature loves courage, and when nature recognizes your courage, it begins to remove obstacles from your way, and you discover the edge. And as you find the edge, you jump off the edge and you discover that it's a feather bed waiting for you and not like a rock bottom. And this is an analogy and a metaphor for being able to trust yourself in the moment of taking this heroic dose.
And to be able to trust the universe that the universe is going to provide and take care of you. Like, that's so trippy, Demetri. When we're not on the podcast, I'll talk to you later about this.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, like it's a beautiful concept, and what the microdose does, I'd say post macrodose of psilocybin, because like, if you look at it, like, you take a giant boulder and you throw it in a pond, you're getting some massive ripples. And these are what I'd look at being, a macro dose. And then when you start to get, smaller stones and you toss them in, you create other ripples, right? And this is the law of cause and effect. And it maintains here, even in this moment, in a sense of being able to recognize that directed focus is important and imperative here, even if it's recreational. Always have an intention with these medicines, with psychedelics, having an intention. Because otherwise, you could face some hard truths, even if you're going.
Yeah, I like to have an intention of having a little time. I do not like when people get toward the light or away from the light, whatever it is they might be doing.
Yeah, I mean, there is a bad trip. There's only shit that you're not willing to accept about yourself.
Yeah.
Well, and I do think like
that.
You talk about the big stone, little stone. Specifically with psilocybin, at least personally, I find like if you go on a big journey, the microdose helps keep those insights, as Mindy would say, or the new connections lit up, right? Yeah. So it kind of helps you keep tapped into those insights or those new pathways that you're learning. You take the big dose, it lights the things up, and then you take the little doses to keep the fire lit and going.
This is
I love that, because I was asking about that earlier. Like, how do we help people maintain the insights that they gain while using psychedelics, right? Because when the psychedelics are gone, sometimes those insights are gone, or they're definitely not as profound or like there as they were in the moment. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? How the hell I'm saying this?
It's because of the network that we revert back to. It's a habitual patterning that happens psychologically. People. I mean, like look at the Matrix, right? Like the
I'm gonna fucking watch the Matrix tonight. I'm not even kidding, Demetri. I'm going home and watching the fucking Matrix because I've never seen it.
It's the movie.
You've never seen the Matrix?
And now I feel like I don't know what the fuck is going on except for on
You've never seen the Matrix?
I've seen the codes. I've seen the codes.
Oh dear fucking God!
I kind of know what you're talking about, but I'm going
missing it. You're like, it's gonna blow your mind.
It is.
Okay, like the movie itself, the analogy of being able to take the red pill and remove yourself enough from the operating system that people typically operate on, and then being able to say like, oh, hey, that's me over there, and by God, like, I'm like, what is the outfit that I'm wearing, you know? And you start to kind of create this relationship with yourself of looking at yourself in the mirror.
I hope I get to wear a really cool outfit in it.
Well, I mean, you know, whatever you want, like whatever you decide to create.
You'll have a penis mask
Minnie,
on.
why are you always taking us in these strange places? Hey, well, you know what though, you guys, we are actually out of time for this episode, so we're gonna pause there. But there is a part 3 to this, and you guys will not be hearing it right now. You'll be hearing it the next Monday, but we're going to pause, and we are going to jump right back into this conversation so that you have an endless stream of psychedelic science coming your way. So say goodbye to Justin and Demetri for right now. And we will see you guys on and we will see you guys on the next episode of Therapeutic Madness. Stay mad, my friends.
Love your people.